Hi everybody again. Today's video, right, I've finally got round to this one. I've seen online, and I know it's quite common, that these Ducatis and maybe other bikes, they're not willing to start up as quickly as you would like. And I'm on my this is a 2016 bike, and I'm on my third battery. And I'll show you the cranking in a moment. But anyway, to start with, I've got a battery tester. So this latest battery I'll show you there was brand new. It's a Motorbat battery, and it's in top condition. And as you can see from these testers, by the way, if you haven't got one, they're so cheap, and you've got to get one of these. So the battery, I know, is in top condition. Let's see if I can just flick forward, and then you can see that when it comes to cranking over, it's quite slow, and it says cranking low. And when it comes to charging, it's charging fine. So what I've decided to do was buy, I've seen them used, a new set of leads that apparently is going to remedy this. I've seen it done online, but never for a Ducati Scrambler, so I thought I'd give it a go. This set comes from Ducati.tech. I think that's the British branch of California Cycle Works. I've had timing belts from them before, super quality. And they've sent this set over. So this set here for the Ducati Scrambler cost, I think it was £84 delivered, which I thought wasn't too bad. It comes with all 3 cables, a booklet full of good pictures and instructions, a little pouch here with some wipes so you may clean the terminals. I think there's some sandpaper there to clean up if you've got any corrosion, and there's some special what do they call it, a silicone dielectric compound. Wow, that sounds official. So that's there, and it's a step-by-step how-to. So it looks, they think it's number 2 on a scale of 1 to 5, so it shouldn't be too, those famous last words, it shouldn't be too difficult. I'm going to try and walk through it. So for now, yeah, that's what we're going to be doing. So for now, it's a simple case of taking the battery out. So I'll take if you can't take your battery out, I suggest we stop. But let's get the battery out, and we'll take a look at what we're left with at that point. Sorry, before we take the battery out, let me just start the bike. This is with 100% new battery, and it probably starts straight up, but this is typically what you get. Well, that didn't, typical, that wasn't too bad. If it started like that all the time, I wouldn't be doing this job, but that's a rare thing to happen. Anyway, let's carry on. Okay, we're back. Right, they said on a scale of 1 to 5, this would be a 2. Well, unless you got arms with the strength of an ox, the size of an elf, this is a difficult job. There's a lot of tight spaces. If you want to do it properly and follow the existing cable routing, then it's doable. You have to be patient. So I've decided to go about it this way. So I'll show you on the bike in a second. I removed the battery, and I'm dealing with 1 cable at a time. There's so many twists and turns. If you remove all of the cables, you will forget where each cable went and where it was tied. So what I've done so far was remove the battery, and I've dealt with the negative ground cable, and I'll show you where that is. But before we get there, this is the original one on the bike. You can see that, and it's much thinner, and it's also quite rigid. The new one's more of a silicone and flexible, and it's much thicker, the new one. So on the bike, let me show you. Here's the new cable that will be going to the battery, and it starts off on the left. You have to take that, just the one screw, so you can pry the side panel, prise it off, as it goes along here, down the side of the engine. You see it's not been cable tied, it's this black one here, just here, and then it goes through the V there, and then it pops out on this side of the engine, and you'll see, if I can show you there, right there, right up in there, that little screw hole. And here's the new cable here, and piggybacked onto that is this other little hoop. I'm not sure where that's going, but that's irrelevant, so I'll replace that. So I will put the new cable flush against the plate. They say to use the sandpaper to clean the surface here, use the sterile wipes to clean it all up, use some of that special grease on there, and then bolt that in, which I'll do now, and then I'll show you that done. So there it is. If you look in there, you'll see the two cables bolted down exactly how they were. So all I've got to do now is, we're finished on this side, so you've got all these vent off cables and all sorts, and they're usually held on with these clips. There's one clip that bolts on with this little Allen bolt, and then there's a rubber to hold them all together on the end. Now I'm not going to do that yet because we've got to deal with the starter cable at some point. But what I'm going to do now is move up to the solenoid and undo those two bolts on there and see what that looks like. Okay, the second part is actually much easier, thank God, because the cable that goes to the starter motor follows exactly the same routing. So I've not fed it up through the frame, but as you can see, it goes between the V again. So I'll just come to the other side and show you what I've done. Right, so like before, where we had the earth in here, this time you see the red cable comes out, but that's the cable that goes down and bolts to the starter motor, which you see here, and I smeared it with grease. I will put a lot more, because they give you this huge tube, I'm going to put a lot more grease on there before I slip this boot back over. So that's the new cable. So all I need to do on this side now is, it's not zip tie, they give you a rubber, there was a rubber kind of tie and a metal bracket to hold the main group at the bottom. So that needs to be tied up. I'll show you that when it's done. And that boot slipped back on with a bit more grease. So then I'll show you what happens up here now. So once I snake that cable back up around, like the negative one, into the battery area, you see here, I've got it pulled out. This is the solenoid. So this red cable that goes to the starter will go to this one on the left as you sit on the bike. And on the right is a short stumpy one. It was to replace this one. This is the one that's on the live terminal. So it's live terminal short stumpy. I'll go and get it so I'll show you. It's this one here. I'll leave it here for now. It's this stumpy one that will go to the right hand side to the positive terminal of the battery. The one I'm to snake up back into the battery box, which I'll show you, goes to the left side. And the one I've already done, which is grounded to the engine. And that'll be positive and a negative. And hopefully after all that, We'll do a crank test to see if it starts up. Anyway, I'll tidy everything up at the bottom and snake that around, and I'll show you how that looks. Okay, on this side it's done as far as I can see. So the cables come down. I've put a new zip tie at the top. There's that rubber bung, and here at the bottom you'll see the clip. The clip doesn't hold this one for some reason. This one's always left dangling. It's never part of it, so it's left like that, and these two are also left at the bottom. And as you can see underneath there, I've slipped the boot over, so that's all nice and tidy and as it was before. So then I'm going to go over to the other side and see if we can tidy up that cable. Okay, so on this side of the bike, as you can see, these two new cables snake up as before. I'm going to zip tie them to this frame post, and you zip tie them along this rail as before, and then they end up here in the battery box. So this cable here is the one that will go on the left, that's to the starter, and the small stumpy which I've got over there, which will connect to the right, which will go to the positive on the battery, and the dark one I have here will go to the negative on the battery, and that's the one that goes to the earth-in bolt on the engine. So I'll just zip tie that all up, and then we'll come back to this area and have a look at that in a second. Okay, so here we are back at the battery box, and as you can see, I've popped the solenoid back in. Let's see if you can make some back in here. Nip those up tight, and the solenoid then has a cap which snaps on. There's a little a lug on the side that you squeeze to pull it off. Let's see if I can get that on there with one hand. It should be quite straightforward. There you go, that's clipped on. And then this little socket pops on top of it. Click, and that's done. So that solenoid's back in. So we're pretty much there. So what we have now is a small stumpy cable which will go to the live, the big black which goes to the negative, and the tricky bit now will be trying to capture all the other attachments, like the quad lock charger, the heated grips, the battery charger. So you've got lots of things to go onto the battery terminals like before. Just remember to put the starter cables to the battery first, and then everything else behind it. Use plenty of that grease. I'm going to give that battery box a little wipe out. I'll get that done, and then we'll have a look at what it looks like. Okay, everybody, here comes the moment of truth. I've just popped the battery charger. If you haven't got one of these battery chargers, I've already said that earlier on, definitely buy one of these. They're only about £20 off eBay. They do lots of things, but what I'm going to do today is just check the crank test. So if I press OK and then go down to crank test, press OK, and it says to start the engine in 29 seconds. Let's start the engine. And let it do its testing. There you go, 483 milliseconds. That's under half a second to start, 483. And let me pop over here, and if you remember, the previous was 1.1, well, it's basically 1.3, so that's a second, that's half a second from 1.5 seconds. So I call that a success. Did it say low crank? Let's see, what did it say underneath? It says cranking low. I don't know why it still says cranking low when it started 1 second faster. But anyway, it started up quicker. Let's try that again. I'm pleased with that because I wasn't really... I mean, that starts on the button. I wasn't really starting my bike wondering about the speed as far as down to the milliseconds. All I know is sometimes it really cranks over low. You think your battery's gone, and it's nothing to do with the battery. I think it is those cables, because, you know, half a second, that'll do for me. Anyway, that's that job done. On a scale of 1 to 5, yeah, 2 or 3. Difficult when you have sausage fingers to wind that cable, and plus it's probably a cold day. Probably better off doing this job in the summer where everything's nice and flexible. Anyway, I'm happy with that. £83 Ducati Tech. What do you think?